Welcome to Burning River Radio, Baseball Edition. I'm Joe Koblitz here with Justin Latta, and we're here to talk about Big 23 and EE and all those other guys with the cool nicknames and how they were dropping bombs on the Pacers.
They were actually up and had a big win for once.
Yeah, so we had with Buckets and Ben Buckets Belden, Jordan Donnelly. Everyone enjoy that too?
A different kind of switch.
No, I'm talking about the guys that are on our radio show. Apparently Justin does not listen. I listened to this morning to the last episode of Burning River Basketball radio. And I found it thoroughly entertaining. So if you just listen to the baseball side, listen to the basketball side too. I know nothing about basketball, but I listen to it. They won't have me on their show. So really considering a radio war, but they don't talk about me. So it's hard to have the radio war with someone who won't acknowledge that you exist.
They're no selling you. Wow, that's pretty cold.
So anyway, the Indians are playing well. This is the first show we've done in season. We did our prediction show last time, but then we didn't do one last week because of weird things happening, and we're a little late this week because we usually try to record on Sundays. But that's okay. This way puts us between the basketball games. But the Indians were really good, and then they were really, really shitty, and then they were okay, and now they look good again. Well, now I think they look good again against Minnesota. And that's kind of the early season. Anything can happen. I mean, if you lose 2 series in a row in June, and it's really whatever, who cares? If you lose 2 in a row in August, if you're in first place and you stay in first place after losing 2 series in a row, nobody cares. But you lose 2 in a row, or 3 in a row, actually they lost.
Everybody loses their mind.
In April, and all of a sudden, it's because it's like I tell my daughter, she's 6, and I tell her, like, a year for her is a way bigger deal than it is to me, because I've already lived 31 years. So a year for me is 1/30th of my life. And for her, it's 1/6 of her life. It's a much bigger percentage. And April's the same way. A game in April is whatever at 14th or 15th of the season, whereas a win in September might be 150th of the season. It's a much larger percentage of the things that have happened.
They all count. So
yeah, and I wish Mike had written an article on it years ago where he actually did some research. I think it was the last time he did research, 4 or 5 years ago. But it was about everything that's happened, about every team, like their record early in the season and how it affects later on. And I think he found that win-loss record doesn't really normalize, at least, or really have an effect on the end season outcome until like June. I mean, really, these first few months, anything can happen. And of course, we've seen teams, the Miracle Mets and whatnot, come back from really far behind. But the Indians aren't really far behind. They're like within 3 games of first place. It's they were in last place and 2.5 out of first.
They're a game and a half out right now.
Yeah, that was before yesterday. And then, of course, today,
the Tigers just blew another game.
Yeah, today, which is Wednesday, the Indians and Twins got rained out, and they'll make that game up when games matter, more or less, either way, in June.
It'll matter less for the Twins by then. It'll matter more for the Indians by feel, but not the Twins.
Yeah, I think you'll see these teams start separating out more. And it's funny that the Indians crushed Texas and then got swept by a Diamondbacks team that is essentially the team we thought they were last year.
Yep.
And then lost to the White Sox, which was a bit surprising, and then lost to the Tigers, which was a little less surprising. But the Twins are nowhere near as good as they kept saying coming into this Twins series. Oh, the Twins have the best ERA in baseball. It's like, so what? They've played 12 games.
It's not even their pitching. It's Jason Castro. They got a catcher who could finally frame for the first time in the history of their franchise, because Joe Mauer wasn't even a great defensive catcher, and all of a sudden their pitchers actually suck less. That's what they paid Jason Castro to do, so it's working for now. But he's not going to make them suck this much less over 162
They suck less. They gave up like 14 runs.
Exactly. So there you go. Well, 17 in 2 games. Yeah.
Yeah.
So regression's going to hit them pretty hard.
They don't have good pitchers. And somebody made that joke, if the Twins had 3 more good starters, they'd be contenders. It's like, yeah, that's nice. Most
They need
teams.
some relievers first too. I think they need 3 relievers and 3 starters.
Oh yeah, you put Phil Hughes in the bullpen or something. But and
And
that was
Byron
funny.
Bucks needs to stop striking out 30% of the time.
It was funny when Phil Hughes and Josh Tomlin both pitched in this series. I was thinking, like, Phil Hughes is like an old Josh Tomlin, but they're the same.
I don't know.
He's
Phil
just
Hughes had
older.
one whole good year, yeah. And I guess Josh
Well,
Tomlin's
but
had parts of good years.
I'm talking about in the style that they throw at this point in their career. They're
That
both
nobody
soft
sw-
tossers,
that nobody
control
swings and
guys.
misses anything they throw.
Yeah, pretty much. And I don't know. I guess we should get into this right now. I wrote a piece on Josh Tomlin this morning, which really for me was kind of a throwaway piece. It wasn't something I put my heart into. I just wrote it so we had something coming out about how the Indians would be better off with Clevenger over Tomlin. And in it, I looked up comps were last season, and his closest players were like R.A. Dickey, and a couple other guys, and they were all really old guys, like considerably older than Tomlin. And it's all guys who throw junk up there, like the Kenny Rogers types back when he was with the Tigers, in the later years. Maybe Mark Burley, like, it's a soft throwing guys that just can't get any
Maybe Moyer.
swings and misses. And Tomlin, like, his overall numbers were equal to these guys. He was worth about 1 win last year over an entire season, and which isn't good if you don't know it. It's not good for a starting pitcher to be worth 1 win. But his control numbers, his walk numbers were way better than every other pitcher. But his home run numbers were so much worse, it evened everything out, and he ended up being equal to pitchers who were not as good as him, just because he gives up so many home runs.
Well, I mean, is it really that bad though that your 5th starter is worth 1 win? Like, I haven't done the research either, but how many teams out there, like, what was the wins above replacement for all their 5th starters? If you take the 5th starter in every team, what do you think the average WAR is?
I don't know. They don't sort them out like that, but I'm going to look up real quick and see what I can find on here.
I'm going to guess you're going to get around 1, maybe 1.5. I don't think you're going to get much higher. I mean, that's why they're 5th starters. So Josh Tomlin's just doing his job.
There is a point to that. My point is that they could be better. Sure. Except not being the best you could possibly be. Here, actually, I'm just going to do math here.
Okay.
Okay, well, you go ahead and say your thing. I got to do some math.
Yeah, so Mike Clevenger in theory could be a better 5th starter just because of pure stuff. He can miss bats, and he definitely has more upside. Where you kind of know Tomlin's going to have a run of 2 or 3 good starts, and then he's going to have a start where he gives up 6 runs in 3 innings. So the only thing is you don't know for sure what Clevenger's going to give you because he hasn't proven at the major league level. We can say definitively that Tomlin's going to go 2 or 3 starts in a row, giving up 2 or 3 runs a game, and we can say definitively that he's going to have a game shortly after, and he's going to get blown up, and then he's going to go back to being kind of good again.
Okay, I got
mediocre starts
to make first on the one that you just made, and then I'll go back to my math.
Okay.
Then I wrote that Tomlin Bauer because of what because it isn't true. Because he was pitching the game and he'd give you at least 4 innings and he'd never give up more than 5 runs. I looked up the game scores for every single and nobody was more consistent in a limited range than Tomlin.
Mm-hmm.
Every out, he had the best floor out of every one of them. Kluber had a worse game than him, except Kluber. Bauer had the worst game out of everybody last year. I looked back the last 30 starts each guy had made, and Bauer had one game that was just absolutely terrible. But game was worse than like Kluber's average. So if you had 5 Klubers, you would use the 5 clears, right? So the Indians have 3 pitchers essentially that are on that level in Salazar and Carrasco. Already, Bat has a ceiling much higher than Tomlin, but his floor is lower than Tomlin, or used to be lower than Tomlin's. It's pretty much as much higher. Tomlin came out first 2 games. It was if I do the ceiling and floor thing, which I will probably do mid-season again. All of a sudden, now Tomlin probably has the worst of everybody. Diamondbacks, I think, or maybe no, it wasn't the one against the Diamondbacks. It was the one against the White Sox.
Yeah.
Because of that, it might have been the Tigers. It was one of those 2 series, but he gave up a ton of runs and pitched only a couple innings. And then they brought in Sean Armstrong, and that was the game that Sean Armstrong got lost. So not only did Tomlin cost the Indians a game, he cost the Indians Sean Armstrong because he had to be sent down. Now, Nick Goody is good as well, and that's something else I went into in the post, is that I'd rather they don't put Tomlin in the bullpen because then you're going to lose Nick Goody, and he hasn't given up a run all year in pitchers. And you already lost Sean Armstrong, who's been pretty electric out there, and you don't want to lose Zach McAllister, who's been one of the more dependable guys in the short season. I just personally think they'd be better off with Tomlin. The other thing, going way back, answering the question about what's the average 5th starter, there are 111 pitchers last year, starting pitchers, better than Tomlin last year. That puts him at about a number 4 starter average for the league.
Mm-hmm.
Pitchers, I didn't sort by team. I guarantee you that there are plenty of teams in there that have. The Dodgers definitely had 5 starters better than Tomlin. The Royals look like they may have too. Like there are plenty of teams. I mean, this is 4 pages in, so I can't read every single name off here. But I mean, like the Indians had a ton of guys. The Indians had 3 guys in the top 60. So, you know, a lot of teams had that were much better than them. Anthony DeSclafani was better than Josh Tomlin last year. You know how bad that is?
He's not their 5th starter, and Cincinnati's got a terrible rotation. But yes, he's not their 5th.
No,
not their 5th starter.
Well, that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point, though. If there's 111 pitchers, some of them are going to be first starters, maybe way behind everybody else. And some people got mad about this. I do think Tomlin is owed a certain amount of respect. He's done a lot, and I wrote about all the stuff he did as well. I mean, if it wasn't for him in the playoffs last year, they probably wouldn't have got out of the second round. They just didn't have the arms to cover it. But now they do. And not only do they have 5 guys who can start in the majors, they've got another 2 or 3 guys back behind them. And Merritt would be my next guy in after Clevenger. Then maybe Plutko. Narveson is pitching really well in AAA through a couple starts. I wouldn't trust Narveson. But honestly, if you cut Tomlin today and brought up Clevenger and then somebody else got hurt, I'd rather risk that and have to pitch Narveson at some point in time this year than keep throwing Tomlin out there every 5 days.
Well, Merritt is essentially left-handed Tomlin. Like you bring Ryan Merritt up, and he's on borrowed time too because he throws 88, 89 with a decent curveball and some other junk. I mean, Merritt's a left-handed Tomlin, so you're only going to get so much run out of him too. And there's going to come a day where Tomlin's just not going to be able to consistently get by with what he has, and you know, even 2 or 3 starts at a time. If he goes 2 or 3 starts without blowing up, one day he's just not going to be able to do it at all. I actually thought that after his first 2 starts, that was going to be the case. But then
I figured I did kind of think I did kind of think he was going to come back down to normal in the 3rd game, and I think he probably has a few more good games in him before he'll blow up another one. Overall, he's not as good of a pitcher. And I brought up a roster here because I have a point to make there that you can always improve a roster. And I'm not saying that the Indians don't have a great roster. I think that as they are a top 3 team in baseball. I think most people would at least agree that they're a top 5 team in baseball. but that doesn't mean they couldn't be better. And you're not going to shoot at improving on starters. Like every starting position player is set. There's not something other than bringing up Jason Kipnis. You're not going to improve anything there. Michael
Bradley
Martinez
Zimmer.
does. Well, I don't know. Maybe he'd be an improvement, but I guess that's something we could talk about on a later date. Maybe the Indians could improve by dropping Almonte, or Chisenhall's hitting really well right now. But doing something like that and bringing up Zimmer. But in general, I think you can always improve even the greatest of teams. So I looked up the 1927 Yankees, which are considered the greatest team in baseball history. And I just have to say they had a 30-year-old catcher named Pat Collins who hit 7 home runs all season. And I guess he had a good on-base percentage, but I mean, he was probably there for defensive purposes. They could have done better there. They had their third baseman was Joe Dugan, and he hit 269 while pretty much everyone on the team was hitting 350 or better. Pitcher who only won 10 games despite them winning 111, and he had a 4.11 ERA in 29 games. I mean, so they could have been better. The best team in baseball history could have been better. So I'll never say that a team can't improve. The Indians can obviously improve. Most of the spots are pretty set, but there are a couple places, and Josh Tomlin is that number one, placing Michael Martinez. Way more important than worrying about Yandy Diaz. More important than anything. He's that number one guy.
I would put Martinez number one.
But he doesn't play.
Well, okay, but on the off chance he bring him in for anything, he doesn't give anything to your team other than defense. Whereas Josh Tomlin plays 5 innings a week, roughly maybe 6, on a good start, maybe 7.
That's kind of my point, though. But you don't want, let's say he was a 1-win player last year. Let's say he's going to be a negative 1-win player this year if he plays the whole season. You don't want to give those innings to a negative 1-win player. If Martinez is a negative 1-win player or somewhere around there, he's only playing a couple times. He's having 1 at bat so far this entire season. He's been up to he had a double in his only bat. He's batting 1,000. He had a sacrifice bunt in his other plate appearance. So if he's going to get 1 plate appearance a week, which is what he's averaging so far, I don't care. I don't want Eric Gonzalez to get 1 plate appearance a week. That's fine. If that was their plan the whole time, I've got no problem with it. If their plan is to play him every single day, then yes, that's a huge issue, and they need to get somebody else up there. And they need to if all of a sudden they were like, oh, Michael Martinez is going to play every day now, I'd say keep Yandy Diaz. But if he's not, then I'd say drop Diaz.
Oh, you're not wrong. Clevenger is definitely a better option than Tomlin. I mean, he's definitely more talented at this point in his career, at least maybe more upside. I think talented is the wrong word because I think Tomlin's talented, but I still think that Clevenger has enough value, or not Clevenger, Tomlin has enough value at this point that, if he were to have 2 or 3 more bad starts in a row, let's say Wednesday or whatever day it was, yesterday, Tuesday, that he had another game where he got destroyed. And then he had another one. If he didn't figure it out, at some point you got to make the change. But Tomlin went back to being who he was on a normal basis yesterday. That's a typical Tomlin start. I mean, yeah, he has bad ones, but that's
and that's what I had said initially. If he gives you 3 runs and 3 runs in 5 innings, I'm pretty much happy with that every single time out. The Indians should be able to score 4 runs a game.
Right.
So if you do that, but I think that Clevenger can do better, and I just think they need to win as many games as they can. You want to win that home field advantage. You have a chance against a really weak Central Division to win the division easily and win home field advantage. So try to do that. That should be their goal. It shouldn't just be to win the division. It should be to win home field advantage so that when they get back to the World Series, they can win it. And Clevenger, To me, there's no way that Tomlin ends the season in the rotation. There's just too many.
Okay, but let's
But
argue. Okay, for the sake of argument, let's say losing Tomlin, because if you don't put him in the bullpen, you don't want to put him in the bullpen because you don't want to lose Nick Goody, you don't want to lose Sean Armstrong. So the only other option is to DFA Tomlin. He has no options left, so you can't send him down.
yes, I'm aware.
Okay, so is losing Josh Tomlin worth hurting your depth? Because remember, Cody Anderson's out for the year. So if you want Mike Clevenger to replace Tomlin, you essentially, and someone's going to claim Tomlin. Tomlin's not going to get through 29 teams on claim. So if you,
I would hope not.
right. So if he's not going to go on claim. So let's say you replace Tomlin with Clevenger, your pitching depth now becomes Ryan Merritt, Adam Plutko, and that's about it. Chris, no, I mean,
Well, and that's what I said. If that comes to it, and someone gets hurt and they need a spot start from Chris Narveson, I would rather risk them needing a spot start from Chris Narveson, which is absolutely something you never want to see. I'm not saying he's a good pitcher because he has a couple good games in AAA. I'm saying Clevenger is because I've seen him pitch live. I saw him pitch in the majors last season. I've seen him pitch in spring training. I know he's a good pitcher. I know he can get people out at the major league level. It's not just because of his, which are incredible if you look at his entire career in AAA, not just this season. But it's not just because of those stats that I'm saying that Clevenger should be in the majors. It's because of everything I've ever seen with him. So to me, it's worth having Clevenger up now, even if there comes a time when you need a spot start from one of those other guys, or even if you need, like it, you're talking about, you have a depth still of who are legitimate major league options, even if they're only like a number 4 or number 5 guy. They're still major league options. So you're talking now about cutting Tomlin and then having 2 pitchers get hurt, and you can still cover that. So you're talking about now 3
neither of those
pitchers
guys
getting
are
hurt.
as good as Tomlin or Clevenger right now. Those guys, I think both of those guys
Well, yeah,
are significantly worse.
but
Why
do you need somebody that's better than him in AAA? Like, what you're saying is keep Tomlin over Clevenger. If somebody else gets hurt, then you don't have somebody as good as Tomlin. Well, who cares? I mean, at that point, that's a maybe, might happen sometime in the future.
Because you use more than 6 starters a year. If you could guarantee you only needed 6 starters,
I guess that's an argument to put. That's an argument to put him in the bullpen. That is not an argument to keep him in the starting rotation. And I don't have a huge problem with him in the bullpen, although using him would be terrifying because the chances of him,
stuff.
yeah, and you would lose one of the good pitchers. Now, they shouldn't need that many pitchers in the bullpen. The starters should be going 6 to 7 innings every night, 3 relievers a night. You got 6 relievers. Use 3 one night, use the other 3 the next night. You should be able to keep that rotating and never really burn anyone out.
But guys have bad games
with a
and you have
rotation
extra
that's
innings.
Good. Well, yeah, and if somebody had a bad game, and they did this last year with Tomlin, you match him up with somebody like Bauer, and Bauer has a bad game. He only pitches 3 innings. Tomlin pitches 3 innings. In that way, you're keeping them both fresh too, and you're not blowing further games.
I mean, if you want to go with a piggyback or a 6-man rotation that includes Clevenger, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with Tomlin piggybacking Clevenger or vice versa. Maybe Tomlin goes 3 and Clevenger goes 4. I'd be okay with that because I think that makes the most sense for Clevenger and Tomlin right now. But they're not going to do that.
Well, they did do that at the end of last season, though. But they did do it at the end of last season, so it's possible. And I mean, if you're really that terrified that 4 Indians pitchers are going to get hurt,
and they are, someone's going to miss.
Somebody will get hurt, but that to me, I'm fine with Ryan Merritt, and I think Merritt is better than Tomlin too. I think just from a physics standpoint, it's easier for a left-hander that throws like that to get away with it than a right-hander.
But it's still going to be borrowed time. It's not, if you're talking 1 or 2 starts a year, sure. But if you have to ask them to make 5, 6, 7, then probably not.
Yeah, we'll see. My last point. We can move on from Tomlin. I do want to prove I listened to the basketball show though, and say somebody on there said there's nothing Dante Jones can do for the Cavs that he can't do in a suit. I'm going to say the same thing is true about Tomlin. If he needs if they need his veteran leadership, they can make him a coach. If that's what his value is, that if they need his loyalty, if they need to show loyalty to him and pay out his contract, which they obviously owe him, and actually if he's taken on waivers, then they don't owe it to him, so that would be a bonus. Save $3 million. But I think if they want his veteran leadership and stuff, put him in a auxiliary role. He should not be pitching every 5 days. The last thing we wanted to talk each other about was some real ignorant shit. I was thinking today, like, everyone's got that old guy in their family, really openly racist.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't. For me, there was an old lady that we used to hang out with. She wasn't actually related to me. My mom drove her to church, so she came over the house all the time. And she wasn't even racist, but she would say things that were really inappropriate at times about colored kids and such like that. And when's that colored kid coming back over here? just inappropriate things, and she didn't know they were inappropriate. She ended up being like 104 when she died, probably 6 years ago. But everybody's got someone like that who just can't. They're way too beyond the point where they can catch up to modern times. And baseball is filled with those people. Not on the race. It used to be filled on the race side, but they've been weeded out. Marge Schott is no longer in the game. Yeah, she had some fun ones. But the new one is these people who just can't. They're so against any new information that they will fight it just because. Well, no, it's not. They'll fight it just because it's new. You could say they can't keep up, but I think they can. Like they could if they wanted to. It's not that hard. There are guys who are older. I think Peter Gammons is decent at it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say stupid shit. That you can learn this stuff. It's just like there are old people who use computers. It's not that crazy. There are people who are 60 who refuse to. It's not completely an age thing. But to me, what we're really talking about directly is Jensen Lewis, and aside Rick Manning and Matt Underwood, but not as extreme, and the newest of new baseball stats, which are not, they didn't come out from Fangraphs, they didn't come out from Baseball Reference, they came out from Major League Baseball. They're putting these stats out. The actual organization itself of Major League Baseball controls StatCast. They have baseballsavant.com that brings you straight to Major League Baseball, and I recommend everyone go to baseballsavant.com. Justin will teach you how to use it because it took me forever to figure it out. But once you figure it out, it is so awesome. They have the best pitch tracking stuff I've ever seen as far as what the pitch is, where it was located, that type of stuff. It's much easier. If you ever see me tweeting pictures of like a strike zone and bad calls and stuff, that's where I get it from now. It's way better than game day. It's much clearer. It's pretty. Use lots of nice colors, make everything dynamic. It's easy to read. And on there, they have exit velocity and percent chance of something being a hit and pitch speed and all the great little things. They don't have the defensive numbers, which bugs me. I still haven't figured out that. But
catch probability?
Yeah, they have that. They have out probability for every individual hit, but they don't have like the defensive maps that they have for the if you go, they have like 2016s, but they don't have anything for 2017 yet. I'm guessing it takes longer to process that stuff. Anyway, it's all great stuff. And what?
They have it. It's kind of hidden. You have to change the URL. Same with the exit velocity for this year.
Okay, well, you can get exit velocity in game on
Yes.
just go to the game feed, and you can get everything from the in-game stuff. And to me, I I understand if you don't like WAR because you can't do the math on it. I can't do the math. I'm not saying you can't, as the listener, that you're not capable of doing this. I can't do it because it's a crazy formula. But I trust it because if I look at a bunch of stats and I pick up my top 10 guys of the year, who are the best 10 players, they're usually within the top 15 in WAR at the end of the season. And
But
it's
that
close.
no one cares about WAR because it's a fake made up stat, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I can understand not liking that stat. I've looked at it enough that I do like it to a point. I don't use it for everything, but I do like it a little bit. I like FIP because I think it's a more accurate representation of what pitchers do. I can understand if you don't like it because there is more to the game than just strikeouts, walks, and home runs. There is, if you have a high ground ball rate, if you induce weak contact, there are other things that can make you a better pitcher that aren't going to be recorded in that necessarily. So I can understand if you don't like that. But exit velocity is literally someone pointing a speed gun at the ball coming off of a bat and telling you what it says. There's nothing to get offended by here. It's literally just literal information. It would be like if somebody told you the temperature outside and you go, I don't believe in thermometers. That's not real.
Well, why is it
It's not real.
different from pitch velocity? Like,
Because they didn't have it 40 years ago.
right, we care a lot about pitcher's velocity now, but we don't care about how hard hitters are hitting the ball. We care how hard pitchers are throwing it. That makes no sense to me because your margin
But
for error, we see with Tomlin, is so small when you don't throw the ball hard. But when you don't hit the ball hard, the ball doesn't get through or it gets caught. When you hit the ball hard, guess like Yandy Diaz is hitting a ton of ground balls, but guess what? He's hitting them so friggin' hard, they have more room to get through because they're hitting them hard. It's the same concept, just from an offensive
well, but
standpoint. But
I would say that exit velocity is way more important than pitch velocity because it correlates more directly with hits. You can throw it 100 miles an hour. That does not mean you're going to get by the batter. Maybe there is correlation, but I've never seen the math written out that correlates a pitch that's 1 mile an hour faster has this much better chance of getting the batter to swing and miss. I haven't seen those numbers written out. I've seen the exit velocity numbers written out. You look at a map, these are the top 10 hardest hit balls of the year, and 9 of them are hits. Like, you can see that type of stuff. 6 of them are home runs. Like, you can see
it matters.
the actual data there, and you know that if someone hits a ball 110 miles an hour, there's a really good chance that they're going to be safe or they almost killed a fielder. You know,
Right.
so
And it relates back to pitchers too, because if you consistently have a pitcher who's allowing guys to hit the ball 90, 95, 100 miles an hour, then he gives up a lot of hard contact, and that's not good. So you can see from the reverse
mm-hmm.
using exit velocity.
And to get back to Jensen, you can ignore it. If it's not something you want to do, I mean, we write about the Indians. We can include it in our writings, or we can write the same way we did in 2011 and 2012 when we started the site and not include it. You don't have to use it. Nobody is forcing you to do this. It's just another piece of information that's available for you to use. If you are a journalist or a talking head or a TV guy or whatever, and you are not using every single piece of information available to you, I really am confused at what you're doing.
You're not doing your job.
It's
Those
like,
people's jobs are to educate fans and who's listening to them. I mean, it's entertainment, but it's also education. People watch the pregame show and the postgame show or radio to learn more about the team and learn about what's going on. These people are supposed to be experts. I don't understand how you can call yourself an expert if you refuse to not only refuse to use the information that your team is using. I mean, Jensen Lewis works for Sports Time Ohio that covers the Indians. The Indians use that information. He openly mocks it. So how can you claim to be an expert if you mock the kind of stuff that the team you're covering emphasizes and uses. That makes no sense. So you're not adding any value. You're not informing anybody. You're not making anybody smarter.
I've talked about it on either this show or Tribe Time Now last year, but Matt Underwood and Rick Manning are just almost as bad. They may be worse because they're doing it during the actual game, but whenever Andre brings up anything advanced, and Andre Knott is fantastic, and I don't think he really understands all this stuff to the fullest, but nobody does. Very few people do it. Jonah Carey understands it. There's guys who write for Fangraphs that understand all this stuff. Most people don't understand it that well. I do as much as I can, but I'm constantly reading. I read books about it. I look it up online. I'm putting the effort out there to learn about it. You're probably at least a little more advanced on it than I am, but I'm trying. And I guess the point is that every time Andre, who is trying as well, he's doing the research, he's going out there and doing the work. Of anything, they laugh at him.
Yeah, Rick Manning shits on it, yeah.
And they're the idiots. Like, they're the ones who are getting left behind. And I wish, I said today, I wish they would just put Andre in the booth and just have him, even if a lot of teams have 3-man booths, just put him up there for the full game. Because I feel like in the position he is, they feel like he's under them. When really he shouldn't be. I mean, as far as entertainment goes, he's funnier than all of them. He's more entertaining. He's more knowledgeable. The only thing he doesn't have is a playing career that Manning had. And I don't really know that that's that great of an asset.
Matt Underwood have the same background. I think he could switch to Matt Underwood. Matt Underwood could do all the interviews on the side, and Andre could.
Well, they would never. I mean, they wouldn't do that any more than they would drop Tomlin after 3 starts. Underwood's been in there for 20 years. I mean, these guys have been around forever. And I wrote an article for Tribe Time Now last year because I didn't want to put too many opinion-y things on the site. Now I do. I just put editorial in front of them and just then say whatever the fuck I want to say. But my point was, how come they put so much effort on the field and so much effort in the front office and then just keep bringing out this mediocre every single day? Like, why do they keep bringing these guys out? They've been there for like 20 years. Most teams don't have guys in the booth for 20 years.
I think they do. I think once you get one of those jobs, you're kind of there. Unless the station holds, like when the Indians used to do games on Channel 43 and they had Jack Corgan and John Saunders, when the station stopped carrying games, Jack Corgan moved on. It's a shame I don't have Jack Corgan because he was TV's Tom Hamilton. But yeah, those guys. I think those guys stay forever. If you don't,
I'm gonna call bullshit on that. Okay, I've got a list of every single person who's ever called a game for the Indians.
Okay,
there's 40 people on this list.
Yeah.
Of them, Rick Manning has done 20. This is his 28th year. Tom Hamilton's done 28 years. Hegan did 23. This is 17. Or this might be 18 for Matt Underwood. It looks like I didn't update it last year for him. So this is like 18 years for Matt Underwood. Herb Score did 33. Bob Neal did 20, but he was moving on. He never did it consecutively. He had a bunch of little chunks. And Jack Graney did 20. No one else has ever done 20 years out of these 40 guys. Most guys, 3 years. I guess you could say that then, like the Hegans and Scores and Neals, when they got in there, then they did have the job for 20 years. But literally, Tom Hamilton and Rick Manning are the longest tenured announcers in the history of Indians baseball, going back to 1929 when they started being on radio.
Huh.
And Underwood is getting up there. It's not, it's not going to take too long. I guess Herb Score was around longer, but he did a lot of his time on radio. And it was split. He was on TV first, and then he was on radio later. Of his years on radio. What?
He hated doing TV.
Yeah, he did TV from 64 to 67. So that was shortly after his playing. It was 68 to 97. He did radio. My point is, and everybody loved Herb Score, although he was crazy at the
end. Just a little.
And everyone loves Tom Hamilton. I love Tom Hamilton.
He's a little crazy now too.
He is, I want to say, resistant at least to the advanced stuff. But I also think that
But
radio should be more of a show. If you're listening to the radio, you want to be entertained by the radio, and that's what he's doing. He doesn't need to. He's telling a story. I think if you're doing TV, you should be much more subdued, and you should be more informative than entertaining.
because people can watch the game and see what's going on, but if you explain to them what's happening, in radio, you need the person to be your eyes because you're not watching the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. People TV are watching it unfold, so you can kind of help them see more than what they're seeing. And especially with the radio, I mean, like you said, Tom Hamilton's he gets off on his tangents, but he's a good storyteller. And I don't think Hamilton is resistant to the new stats. He probably is to a point, but like you said, he doesn't need them, so he ignores them. It doesn't add much to he doesn't have time to put all that in there.
Yeah,
But
and I
guys
think
like Jensen Lewis and Rick Manning are like, who cares? Like those are the guys who are mocking it and running away from it. Tom Hamilton. So like it's one thing, like you said, to ignore it and just not bother with it, but he also doesn't need it. But then you have other guys who mock it and who just try to like shove it in the corner on purpose.
yeah, and it's something that we talk about almost on a daily basis on Twitter, and I think most of the Twitter crowd has embraced the modern stuff, but they're also on Twitter. I mean, they're younger people in general than the average baseball fan. I mean, whose grandparents don't watch baseball? Pretty much everybody, right? Your grandfather watches baseball if he's alive. Mine
Yeah.
watched it until he died. That's a very common thing. But your grandparents aren't not on Twitter generally. Your parents probably aren't on Twitter unless you're really. So if you're over 10, your parents are probably not on Twitter in general. So those people are not embracing these stats, but the younger people are almost completely. And when they don't, I question like maybe you're not a baseball fan, because if you're a baseball fan, you want to know everything there is to know. If there's anything that can help you know things, and again, this is you predict the future more than actually telling you what happened. One of Lewis's comments was one of his first ones this year where he was really attacking it. Was he goes his exit velocity was ... Oh, who cares? He got a hit. Something like that. And that's two different. They're two separate things. If you consistently have a hard exit velocity and a good launch angle, you are going to get hits. If you got a hit, then that's in the past. That's already something that happened. If you got out, it's something that happened. It has no effect on the future. There really needs to be more of a separation between predictive stats and accomplishment stats. If you won 20 games, a lot of the Sabre guys will throw that out. I don't care how many pitcher wins you got. But it is an accomplishment to win 20 games. That means you stayed in the game long enough for your team to win 20 times. That's a good thing. Like that's worth something. And to me, that's an accomplishment stat. It's not going to predict anything. It doesn't mean you're going to win 20 games next year, or it doesn't mean you're not going to lose 20 games next year. It just means you did it. Congratulations, you did it. If you knock in 120 RBIs, congratulations, you did it. It doesn't mean you could have knocked in more if you had batted in a different spot, or less if you batted in a different spot. But you did it. You physically did those things. And I think there's room in baseball to remember and acknowledge when people do things, and also to base your expectations not on the things they did, but on the things they can do. And in order to do that, you need to know things like exit velocity. You need to know things like FIP and batting average on balls in play. These are important things to predict the future. We still can't predict it perfectly, but it's a lot easier to predict it using those things than the old school stats.
And the Indians broadcast are so far behind that. Like you barely get any of that on the broadcast. And like you said, unless Andre not touches on it, and they really don't, because every time they do it, Jensen Lewis has to interject that he hates it. So like they can't even like seriously reference any of that stuff that matters. I mean, I think the predictive stuff matters, and I think the accomplishment stuff matters, because if you look at the leaderboards, like the top 10 guys in average exit velocity this year are like, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Miguel Cabrera, and Francisco Lindor is up there. So that tells you that Francisco Lindor is hitting the ball as well as those guys. Whether, I guess those are things that could fluctuate because he could have a week where he doesn't hit any balls on the nose. But if you get to 100, 150, 200 at bats, and he still has one of the 5 best average exit velocities in baseball, that tells you that he consistently hits the ball hard, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I guess my
up in the future, but I don't understand why you can't call attention to that as being a good thing. I mean, would you rather the guy like look at Yandy Diaz? Yandy Diaz hits the crap out of the ball, but the problem is half the time their ground balls are low line drives that are easily caught. So yeah, he hits the ball hard, but you got to add context to it and say, well, and if it's the same stuff as Tyler Naquin last year. Everybody wanted to acknowledge that he was he had this high batting average, high slugging percentage, all this, but nobody wanted to acknowledge that, hey, he's doing things that aren't sustainable. When you hit the ball hard, and there are stats that you can rank for that are sustainable, that are going to make you consistently good. There are things Naquin did that showed he was not going to be consistently good. But to keep ignoring those things, then you're misinforming fans. If you don't touch on those things, then that's why people probably got mad that Naquin got sent down, because people looked at his line last year and said, "Oh, this guy was really good last year," but because they just looked at the average stats.
Yeah.
But baseball.
My final.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's it. My final point. I think we should wrap this thing up here. But my final point is just that of sheer confusion, because for years, and I'll go back to my grandpa again. This guy's due. He's been hitting the ball real hard. He's gotten out a few times in a row. He's due. Thing. It's not based on any stats or anything. It was just he hit the ball real hard to left field last time. He's going to get a hit. And eventually everybody's going to get a hit. So you can keep saying he's due. But I feel like the exit velocity stat is is a number of value to put with the he's due feeling. If you look, he hit 10 in a row over 100 miles an hour and he got out 8 times. He's due. Like, you can now
believe that.
You can now correlate what used to be a feeling and actually put a number to it now. Now, maybe that takes some away from the romantics. And I'd love to have a romantic on the podcast. But the problem is most of them are so stubborn, like the one who was arguing with me this morning, that it doesn't matter what you say to them, they will never, ever change their mind, and I don't really want to talk to someone like that. If somebody would come... and I'll bring up Kate Boron, who writes for us. She is a romantic as far as baseball is concerned, to the extreme, and that's why I like her writing for us, because she covers that and nobody else writes like that for us, and I like it. But when she's writing about guys, she will use WAR, and she will use FIP, and she will use UZR, and it'll be in there when it's necessary. She won't put that in her, hey, it's opening day, we've been waiting for this all year long, and this, and that's what I think those are people's favorite things that she writes based on what our readership is and everything, and the comments we get back on it. But when she's writing about minor leaguers, she's not writing like that, and I want more open-minded people like that. I want people who are at least consider using these other statistics. Don't close yourself off before we even start this discussion. There's room for all of it. It's not a war. We're not fighting. I'm just trying to talk to people, and they get so mad so quickly when you say Josh Tomlin should get set down or cut. That's it for us this time. I know Burning River basketball will be back shortly. They said they'd be back after either the next game or the one after that, with Ben Buckets Belden, Danny the Manny Cunningham, and Jordan Goofball Donnelly. He has to get that nickname out there. They'll all be back. Hopefully Ben is recovered from his life-altering illness. If you didn't know what that was, go back and listen to the last one. I have been Joe Koblitz. You can follow me on Twitter at Burning River BB and tell me why you like Josh Tomlin. He's been Justin Lotta. You can follow him on Twitter at JL_baseball, and you can tell him why you hate Jensen Lewis. I think that'll be fair. We'll split him up. If you like Josh Tomlin, tell me. If you hate Jensen Lewis, tell Justin. And that's it for us. That's it for us. Have a great night, and hopefully the Indians will continue on with their winning ways. Go Tribe.